"If you give me food, I will heal your son," she said, dirty, starving, and invisible to those who always bought their solutions. The millionaire turned his back until days passed, and the boy no longer blinked. When he finally gave in, he discovered the illness was only the tip of something much bigger and much darker. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Now, continuing, the mansion in Kensington stood imposing against the grey London sky, with its manicured gardens and enormous windows that reflected the world outside, without letting anyone see what was happening within. This was how Michael Taylor had always liked to live, protected by high walls and automatic gates, master of an empire built on quick decisions and ruthless negotiations. At 47, he ran one of the largest property development companies in the country, erecting glass towers where entire communities once stood, transforming landscapes into profit with a single signature. Power was so ingrained in his routine that he barely noticed when he wielded it. A phone call, an email, a firm look in a meeting, and things happened. They always happened. But inside that immense house, among the imported furniture and paintings by renowned artists, something very different was happening. Something that no money, no influence, no political connection could solve. Gabriel, his son of only 9 years, was slowly disappearing, not in the literal sense, but in a much more terrifying way. The boy who 6 months ago ran through the corridors, played football in the garden, and filled the house with laughter, could now barely hold a glass of water. It all began with small stumbles, fingers that wouldn't quite obey, words that came out slurred. Michael, too busy with mergers and acquisitions, was slow to notice. It was Mrs. Lords, the housekeeper who had cared for the house for nearly 15 years, who first saw that Gabriel was different. At the first appointment, the pediatrician spoke of childhood stress, too many activities. He prescribed vitamins and recommended more free time. Michael accepted the diagnosis, without question. After all, his schedule didn't allow for long conversations about health. But the weeks passed, and Gabriel grew worse. The falls became more frequent. His hands trembled when he tried to write. His eyes, once so lively and curious, began to take on a distant expression, as if the boy were drifting away from everyone and everything. That was when Michael finally stopped, literally stopped. He cancelled meetings, postponed trips, called off business dinners. For the first time in decades, something was more important than work. Specialists began to parade through the mansion, neurologists, orthopedists, geneticists, each with their elaborate hypotheses and sophisticated tests. MRIs showed a perfectly healthy brain. Blood tests came back within normal parameters. Genetic tests pointed to no known syndrome. And while the doctors theorized and debated, Gabriel continued to waste away. The paralysis, slow and cruel, advanced from his limbs to his torso. The boy began to need help to eat, to dress, to perform the simplest daily tasks. Michael watched his son fade like a candle burning down to its end, and for the first time in his life he felt completely powerless. The nights were the worst. Michael would wander the mansion's corridors, passing Gabriel's bedroom door, listening to the boy's irregular breathing, the weak coughs, the muffled sobs that sometimes came before dawn. Mrs. Lords would spend hours by the bed, reading stories Gabriel no longer had the strength to follow, singing lullabies that made the boy close his eyes for a few minutes of rest. The entire house seemed to have entered a state of anticipatory grief, with the staff speaking in whispers and avoiding looking directly at Michael, as if they were afraid of reminding their employer of the tragedy unfolding beneath that luxurious roof. It was on a particularly difficult afternoon, after another battery of inconclusive tests, that Benedict entered Michael's office with a strange expression. Benedict had worked at the house since before Gabriel was born, taking care of maintenance, security, everything that kept the property running perfectly. He was a man of few words, discreet, always present, but almost invisible, just the way the rich like their employees to be. But on that day, there was something different in his eyes, a mixture of hesitation and urgency. "There's someone outside who says she can help, Mr. Taylor," Benedict said, wringing his cap in his hands. "A girl showed up at the gate early this morning. Wouldn't leave. Says she knows what's happening to young Gabriel." Michael looked up from the paperwork scattered across his desk, documents for a deal that no longer mattered as much as it should. His first impulse was to send her away, another opportunist trying to take advantage of the situation. The news of Gabriel's mysterious illness had leaked to certain circles, and there was no shortage of healers, psychics, and religious figures of all denominations showing up with promises of miraculous cures. But something in Benedict's expression made him hesitate. "A girl, you said. How old is she?" 13, 14 at most, but she's no ordinary child, sir. There's something in her eyes, something that—" Benedict paused, searching for the right words. "She reminded me of my grandmother. You know, the kind who performed blessings, who knew about herbs, who knew things the doctors didn't. I think you should at least hear what she has to say." Michael sighed deeply. He was so tired, so desperate, that even an absurd suggestion seemed worth considering. "Let her in," he said finally. "But stay close, Benedict. If she's another lunatic, you get her out of here." 15 minutes later, Michael was face to face with the most unlikely person who could have crossed the gate of his mansion. The girl was small, too thin, with worn-out clothes that had seen better days and bare feet dirty with earth. Her dark curly hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and a sort of cloth bag was slung over her shoulder. But it was her eyes that were striking. Large, dark, intense eyes that looked at Michael without fear, without reverence, without the subservience he was used to seeing. Eyes that seemed to see right through him. "My name is Iris," the girl said, in a voice that sounded older than her body suggested. "I came because I heard about the boy who is getting sick. I came because I know what's happening to him, and I came because I'm hungry." The disarming frankness of the statement caught Michael by surprise. He almost smiled, but the weight of the last few weeks wouldn't allow it. "All right, I'll have some food prepared for you. But tell me, how do you know about my son? Who told you?" "No one needed to tell me," Iris replied, crossing her thin arms. "The streets talk, people gossip, and I've learned to listen. But that's not what matters now. What matters is that your son isn't sick. He's being poisoned." The word hung in the air like a stone dropped into a still lake, creating ripples that spread through the office's silence. Michael felt the blood run cold in his veins. Poisoned. The possibility had never crossed his mind, nor that of the doctors who had paraded through the house. "What do you mean, poisoned?" he managed to say, his voice coming out weaker than he intended. "It's a rare poison," Iris continued, approaching the desk with decisive steps. "Not the kind that kills quickly. It's the kind that destroys bit by bit, that looks like a disease, that confuses even the best doctors. My mother—" The girl stopped, correcting herself. "The woman who raised me, she knew this poison. She taught me about it before she passed." Mrs. Lords appeared at the door with a tray of food, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, orange juice. Iris looked at the food with an intensity that revealed how long it had been since her last decent meal. Michael gestured for her to eat, and the girl needed no further encouragement. She sat in one of the armchairs and began to eat with a speed that was almost desperate, but without losing her dignity. Between bites, she continued to speak. "I need to see the boy. I need to see where he stays, what he eats, what he touches. I need to feel the environment. If I'm right, I'll find the source. And if I find the source, I can prepare the antidote." Michael was still processing the word poisoned. Who would do this? Who could possibly want to harm a child? The questions piled up in his mind, each more disturbing than the last. But before he could articulate any of them, Iris was already on her feet, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. "Take me to him," she said simply. Gabriel's room was on the second floor overlooking the back garden. It was a large room, decorated with a superhero theme, full of toys the boy no longer had the energy to touch. Gabriel was lying in bed, so small and frail that he looked half his 9 years. Mrs. Lords had just given him a bath and was combing his brown hair with gentle, loving strokes. The boy opened his eyes when he heard footsteps, and the hint of a smile appeared when he saw his father. "Hi, Dad," Gabriel whispered, his voice weak, but still recognizable. "Hi, champ," Michael replied, his heart aching. "I brought someone to see you. This is Iris." The girl approached the bed with slow steps, observing Gabriel attentively. She showed no pity, offered no exaggerated caresses, didn't speak in that childish tone adults often use with children. She just really looked as if she were reading a story, written on the boy's body. "May I touch your hand?" Iris asked, and Gabriel nodded weakly. She held the small, cold hand between hers, closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them and moved closer to the boy's face, inhaling deeply. Michael and Mrs. Lords exchanged confused glances, but didn't intervene. After a few minutes of silent observation, Iris moved away and began to search the room. She opened drawers, examined toys, smelled pillows, ran her hands over the furniture. She looked like a detective searching for invisible clues. Michael watched her with a mixture of skepticism and desperate hope. Part of him wanted to believe this strange girl had answers the doctors didn't. Another part feared he was wasting precious time on superstition. It was when Iris stopped in front of the toy shelf that something changed. She pulled out a colorful box in the corner, a box of modeling clay Gabriel had received for his last birthday. She opened the box slowly, smelled the contents, then dipped her fingers into the soft, colorful substance. Her eyes narrowed. "It was here," she said, her voice low but firm. "It's here, mixed with the clay." She turned to Michael, holding the box as if it were crucial evidence. "Your son played with this every day. His hands came into contact with it. Then he'd put his hands to his mouth, his eyes. The poison entered slowly, almost imperceptibly, but constantly, enough to destroy the nervous system without killing him immediately." Michael felt his legs grow weak. He held onto the dresser to keep from falling. Mrs. Lords brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. Gabriel, still in bed, didn't fully understand what was happening, but he sensed the tension in the air. "How do you know?" Michael managed to ask, his voice hoarse. "How can you be sure?" "Because I've seen this before," Iris replied, and for the first time there was pain in her voice. "The woman who raised me, who taught me everything I know about plants, about cures, about poisons. She was a victim of the same type of poisoning. We lived in a small village, in the Cotswolds, in a place that big companies wanted for their projects. She refused to leave, refused to sell the land that had belonged to her family for generations. And then—" Iris paused, swallowing hard. "Then someone decided she needed to be out of the way." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with terrible implications. Michael looked at the girl before him, at those eyes that carried a wisdom and a pain no child should have. And then he looked at his son in the bed, at the boy who was being destroyed by someone for some reason he still didn't comprehend. "Can you save him?" Michael asked, and for the first time in his life, his voice sounded pleading. "I can try," Iris replied, "but it will take time and I'll need things you can't buy in a pharmacy. I'll need specific plants, roots, time to prepare the right treatment, and I'll need you to trust me." Michael looked at Mrs. Lords, who nodded slightly. He looked at Gabriel, who was watching the strange girl with a curiosity he hadn't shown in weeks, and then he made a decision that went against his entire controlling, rational nature. "Do whatever is necessary," he said. "Use the resources of this house. Ask for whatever you need. Go wherever you have to go. Just—" his voice failed him. "Just save my son." Iris nodded, placing the contaminated box of clay in her bag. "I'll need a place to work, a space where I can prepare things without being interrupted, and I'll need you to take me to a few places early tomorrow. I know a market in the East End where they still sell the plants I need. After that, we might have to go further." "Benedict can take you wherever you need to go," Michael said immediately, "and there's an empty staff room out back. You can use it as you wish. Mrs. Lords, please, prepare the room for Iris and provide her with anything she asks for." The housekeeper nodded and left, taking Iris with her. Before crossing the threshold, the girl looked one last time at Gabriel. "You're going to be okay," she said to the boy. "I promise I'll do everything I can." And in that moment, Gabriel smiled. A small, weak but genuine smile. The first real smile in weeks. When he was alone with his son, Michael sat on the edge of the bed and held Gabriel's hand carefully, as if the boy were made of crystal and might break at any moment. Who would do this, he thought, his mind racing in circles? Who would have a reason to want to destroy an innocent child? The names and faces of people he had harmed over the years began to parade through his memory. Competitors he had crushed, partners he had betrayed, communities he had displaced. How many enemies had he made on his climb to the top, and how many of them would have the courage for something so monstrous? Gabriel squeezed his father's hand weakly, bringing him back to the present. "She's different, isn't she, Dad?" the boy whispered. "The girl. She doesn't feel sorry for me." "I like that." Michael felt his eyes burn. "She's going to help you, champ. Everything's going to be okay, I promise." But even as he made the promise, a part of him wondered if it was a promise he could keep. Because if Iris was right, if Gabriel was really being poisoned, it meant the danger was inside his own home. It meant that someone close, someone he trusted, was responsible. And it meant that perhaps he himself was the real target. That night, Michael didn't sleep. He stayed in his office, mentally reviewing every employee, every person who had access to the house, every possible motive. Benedict had been with him for 15 years, Mrs. Lord's almost as long. There was the cook, Marlene, the cleaners who came 3 times a week, the gardener, the driver, all with stories, with families, with reasons to be there. Could any of them be capable of something so horrific? Outside the window, London pulsed with its infinite lights, millions of lives happening simultaneously, each with its own dramas and secrets. Michael had always felt above it all, protected by his walls and his money, but now he realized there were no walls high enough to protect what truly mattered. In the back room, Iris was also awake. She had refused the comfortable bed Mrs. Lords had prepared and preferred to sleep on the floor, on a thin blanket, the way she was used to. In her mind, she reviewed everything she had learned from the woman who raised her. The lessons about poisonous plants, about antidotes, about how the human body reacts to different toxins. She knew she had a chance to save Gabriel. But she also knew that in doing so, she would be opening doors that were perhaps better left closed. Because Iris had recognized the poison in the modeling clay, not just because the woman who raised her had been a victim of it. She recognized it because she knew exactly who had access to it, who knew how to use it, who had reasons to want to destroy everything Michael Taylor loved. And that truth, when it came to light, would destroy much more than just a family. It would expose decades of lies, of revenge, of crimes buried under contracts and money. It would reveal that the boy in the bed fighting for his life might not be who everyone thought he was. But that was a matter for later. For now Iris had a mission, save Gabriel. The rest would come in its own time. Outside, the city remained awake, indifferent to the dramas unfolding inside that Kensington mansion. The lights blinked, the cars sped down the avenues, lives went on. But within those walls, everything was about to change. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. The dawn came slowly over London, bringing with it an orange sky that promised warmth. Iris was already awake before the sun rose, sitting in the small backyard of the mansion, surrounded by plants she had brought from her bag. They were simple herbs at first glance, but she treated them with reverence, separating leaves, crushing roots, mixing everything with a precision that came from years of observation and learning. Mrs. Lords found her like this, focused on her work, and watched for a few minutes before approaching. "I've made coffee and toast," the housekeeper said softly. "You need to eat well if you're going to take care of the boy." Iris looked up, and for the first time since she had arrived, a brief smile crossed her face. "Thank you, ma'am, you're kind. But I need to finish this first. The treatment has to start soon. With every hour that passes, the poison continues to take effect." Mrs. Lords nodded and left the tray of food on a nearby small table. She watched the girl work, saw the small but skilled hands manipulating the plants, and felt something strange stir inside her. Guilt, perhaps, or shame. During all those months of watching Gabriel waste away, she had never questioned the medical diagnoses, never thought it could be anything other than an illness, but now, seeing this poor barefoot girl identify in minutes what expensive specialists couldn't see in months, Mrs. Lords wondered how many other things she had let pass unnoticed. Benedict appeared shortly after 7 in the morning, ready to take Iris wherever she needed to go. The market the girl had mentioned was in the East End, in a bustling neighbourhood called Whitechapel, a world away from Kensington and its ostentatious luxury. The car ride took nearly an hour in the dense London morning traffic, and during the entire journey, Iris kept her face pressed to the window, watching the city transform around her. The mirrored buildings and mansions gave way to simple houses, street shops, people walking hurriedly to work. The Whitechapel market was a vibrant and chaotic place, full of stalls selling fruits, vegetables, spices, and all sorts of goods. But Iris wasn't interested in the most conspicuous stalls. She was looking for something specific, and she knew exactly where to find it. In the back of the market, almost hidden between piles of empty boxes, was a small stall run by an elderly woman with dark skin and completely white hair tied in a bun. The sign above the stall simply read, "Medicinal Herbs." "Mrs. Cider," Iris called, and the woman looked up from the leaves she was organizing. "Child," the old woman replied with a smile that revealed a few missing teeth. "It's been a while since I've seen you around here. I thought you'd left London." "I've been wandering," Iris said simply. "But now I need a few things, something serious." Mrs. Cedar's smile vanished, replaced by a look of concern. "Tell me, child." Iris looked around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned over the counter and began to list the plants she needed. Mrs. Cedar listened attentively, and with each name mentioned, her expression grew more grave. When Iris finished, the old woman sighed deeply. "This is not for playing, girl. Some of these plants are dangerous in the wrong hands. What are you trying to do?" "Save a life," Iris replied firmly. "A child is being poisoned. I need to neutralize the poison before it's too late." Mrs. Cedar studied the girl's face for a long moment, seeing a determination and seriousness that didn't match her age. Finally, she nodded and began to gather the requested herbs. It took nearly half an hour to get everything, wrapping each plant carefully in brown paper and explaining to Iris the precautions for preparation. "And girl," Mrs. Cider said as Iris was about to pay, "you know that treatment isn't just about herbs, right? You have to find out who's doing the harm, because if you don't stop the source of the poison, the antidote will be useless." "I know," Iris replied, putting the packages in her bag. "And I will find out. I promise." On the way back, Benedict finally broke the silence he had maintained all morning. "Girl," he began without taking his eyes, "off the road, can I ask you a question? How did you learn all this about plants, about poisons?" Iris was quiet for a moment, looking out the window. "My foster mother. She was a healer, a midwife, a herbalist. She knew things that books don't teach." The pause was long. "She died when I was 10. The same way young Gabriel was dying. Only no one came in time to help her." Benedict gripped the steering wheel tighter. "I'm sorry, girl." "Don't be," Iris said, and there was a hardness in her voice that didn't match her age. "What's needed is to find out who is doing this and why." When they arrived back at the mansion, Michael was in his office, surrounded by papers and with the expression of someone who hadn't slept at all. He called Benedict for a private conversation, and Iris went straight to the backyard to prepare the first treatment for Gabriel. The next few hours were intense. Iris worked with impressive concentration, boiling water, mixing herbs, filtering liquids, preparing poultices. Mrs. Lords helped as she could, following the girl's instructions to the letter. When the treatment was finally ready, Iris took everything to Gabriel's room. The boy was awake, propped up on pillows, his eyes tired but attentive. He watched Iris enter with a tray full of jars and bottles, and for the first time in weeks, there was curiosity in his gaze. "Is this going to taste bad?" Gabriel asked in a weak voice. "Probably," Iris answered honestly. "But it will make you better. Are you willing to try?" Gabriel nodded. Anything is better than being like this. The first treatment was difficult. The liquid Iris prepared was bitter, and Gabriel grimaced with every sip, but he managed to drink it all. Afterwards, she applied warm compresses to his legs and arms, massaging them with circular motions that seemed to follow a specific pattern, Michael watched everything from the doorway, tense, wanting to believe but afraid of being disappointed yet again. "It will take a few days to see results," Iris explained without stopping what she was doing. "The poison has been in his system for months. It won't leave overnight, but little by little, we'll see improvements. First, the tremors will lessen, then the strength will start to return. It's a slow process, but it will happen." "And during this time," Michael asked, "my son remains vulnerable. If the person who did this realizes the poison is no longer working." "That's why I need to find the source," Iris interrupted, finally stopping her work and looking directly at Michael. "I need to know who has access to this room, who buys things for Gabriel, who touches his belongings. I need names." Michael sat down heavily in an armchair. "The permanent staff are few. Benedict, whom you've met, Mrs. Lords, the cook, Marlene, who's been with us for about 8 years. The gardener, Walter, comes 3 times a week. The cleaners, 2. Women who work on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And the driver, Paul, but he's out of the house more than he's in." "And who else visits the house? Who has easy access to Gabriel's room?" Michael hesitated. "Veronica, my ex-partner. She comes to see Gabriel sometimes. We haven't lived together for over 3 years, but she still—" He paused, searching for the words. "She still has keys to the house." The name hung in the air like an unspoken accusation. Iris absorbed the information without showing a reaction, but her brain was already working. Ex-partner with free access. Relationship over. Possible. Resentments. It was a start. "I need to meet this Veronica," Iris said. "She's coming for lunch tomorrow," Michael replied, his voice tense. "She makes a point of seeing Gabriel every week, says it's the least she can do since—" He stopped again, and this time he didn't complete the sentence. "Since what?" Iris pressed. Michael looked at his son, who had fallen asleep after the treatment, and then at the girl before him. "Since she's his mother." The words fell like bombs in the silence of the room. Iris frowned, confused. "But you said you're his father. That Gabriel is your son." "He is. At least that's what everyone has always believed." Michael stood up and walked to the window, turning his back to Iris. "Gabriel was born when Veronica and I were together. She always said I was the father, and I never had any reason to doubt it. But there are things in her past I don't know, things she never wanted to talk about." Iris processed this information in silence. The story was getting more complicated, the layers revealing themselves one by one. And the more she discovered, the more certain she was that Gabriel's poisoning was not a random act of cruelty. It was something planned, deliberate, with deep roots in events that had perhaps happened long before the boy was born. "I will find out the truth," Iris said finally. "All of it, because I have a feeling the poison is just the tip of something much bigger." That night, after applying the second treatment to Gabriel and ensuring he was sleeping comfortably, Iris went to explore the mansion. She moved silently through the wide corridors, observing paintings on the walls, photographs in frames, small details that told the story of that family. There were photos of Michael at business events, always with a confident, powerful smile. There were photos of Gabriel as a baby, a toddler, always smiling. But there were very few photos of Veronica. And in the ones that existed, she was never looking directly at the camera. Iris found Mrs. Lords in the kitchen making tea. The housekeeper seemed surprised to see the girl still awake. "Can't sleep?" Mrs. Lords asked. "I'm used to little sleep," Iris replied, sitting on one of the high stools at the counter. "Mrs. Lords, may I ask you a question?" "Of course, child. How long have you worked here?" 15 years in March. I arrived when Mr. Taylor was still single, living alone in this huge house. I saw him meet Mrs. Veronica. I saw her get pregnant. I saw young Gabriel being born." Mrs. Lordy's voice softened. "I've seen a lot in these years. And what have you seen about Veronica?" Mrs. Lords poured the tea into 2 cups and pushed one towards Iris. "She was different when she arrived, softer, kinder. But there was something about her, you know, a sadness that never went away, as if she were carrying a weight no one could see. And after Gabriel was born, it got worse. She looked at that baby with love, but also with—" The housekeeper searched for the right word. with fear, as if she were afraid of what the boy represented. Iris took a sip of tea, letting the warm liquid heat her throat. And why did they separate? I never knew for sure. One day they were together, the next she was packing her bags. Mr. Taylor never spoke about it, and I never asked. It's not my place, but I heard things. You know how it is. Staff gossip. What kind of things? That she discovered something about his past, something related to his business, to the lands he bought, to the people he... Mrs. Lord stopped, realizing she was saying too much. I don't know if I should be telling you this. Mrs. Lords, Iris said seriously, if I'm going to truly help Gabriel, I need to know everything. Every detail could be important. The housekeeper sighed, struggling with herself. After a long silence, she began again, her voice lower this time. Many years ago, before I came here, Mr. Taylor bought land in the Cotswolds. Land where entire communities lived, simple people who had been there for generations. He wanted to build a resort, a big development. The people didn't want to sell. There was resistance. And then... Mrs. Lords looked at her own hands. Then bad things started to happen. Houses catching fire, people getting sick suddenly, community leaders disappearing, until eventually everyone left or passed on. Iris felt her blood run cold. The Cotswolds, communities driven out. It was exactly what had happened to the village where she grew up, where the woman who raised her had been, where everything had ended. This village, Iris asked, her voice higher than she intended, did it have a name? Mrs. Lords frowned, trying to remember. It was a small name, a saint's name, I think. Saint Rita's Vale, maybe, or St. Rose's. I'm not sure. Iris shot up so fast, she knocked over her cup, which shattered on the floor into 1,000 pieces. But she didn't even notice. Her mind was spinning, connecting dots that suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. St. Rita's Vale, that was the exact place. The place where she had grown up. The place where the woman, who raised her, had resisted until the end. The place that was destroyed to make way for a luxury resort that was never even built, because in the end, the investors pulled out. Iris, are you all right? Mrs. Lords asked, alarmed by the look on the girl's face. But Iris was already leaving the kitchen, running to the room she had been given. She needed to think, to fit the pieces together, to understand. Michael Taylor, the man whose son she was trying to save, was the same man responsible for the destruction of her home. The same man whose companies had taken everything from her. The irony was so cruel it was almost painful. She could leave. She could leave Gabriel to his fate, considering it a form of cosmic justice. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was the boy's face, those tired but still hopeful eyes, that faint smile when she had promised to help. Gabriel was not to blame for his father's crimes. He was just a child, innocent, a victim of a cycle of revenge that had begun long before he was born. Iris spent the entire night awake, fighting with herself, with her memories, with her anger and her compassion. When the sun rose again, she had made a decision. She would save Gabriel, but she would also uncover the whole truth, expose all the lies, and make Michael Taylor face what he had done. Because sometimes healing isn't just physical. Sometimes you have to heal souls too, even if it hurts. Especially when it hurts. The next day brought Veronica. She arrived around noon, driving an imported car and wearing sunglasses too large for her delicate face. She was a beautiful woman, probably in her late 30s, with well-kept blonde, hair and clothes that screamed money. But there was something in her movements, a tension in the way she held her purse, in how she looked around, that betrayed nervousness. Iris watched her from the second-floor window. She saw Veronica enter, greet Michael with polite coldness, ask about Gabriel. She saw the woman climb the stairs with hurried steps, anxious to see the boy. And she saw something else. She saw Veronica pause for a moment at Gabriel's bedroom door, take a deep breath as if preparing for something difficult, and only then go inside. Lunch was tense. Michael insisted Veronica stay, and she accepted reluctantly. They sat at the large dining room table, with Gabriel between them in an adapted chair, and Iris seated discreetly in a corner. Veronica barely touched her food, her gaze alternating between her son and the unknown girl. "Who are you?" Veronica finally asked, looking directly at Iris. "Someone who is helping Gabriel," Michael answered before Iris could speak. "Someone who identified what the doctors couldn't." "And what would that be?" Veronica's voice had a hint of defiance. "Poisoning," Iris said calmly, watching the woman's reaction. For a fraction of a second, something crossed Veronica's face. Surprise, fear, guilt, or maybe just shock. It passed so quickly that Michael didn't notice, but Iris saw it. And she knew in that instant that Veronica knew. Maybe she wasn't the one administering the poison, but she knew it was happening. "That's absurd," Veronica said, but her voice trembled. "Who would do such a thing? Who could—" "That's exactly what we're trying to find out," Michael replied. "But Iris is treating Gabriel, and he's already responding. Isn't that right, champ?" Gabriel, who had managed to eat by himself for the first time in weeks, nodded with a smile. "I'm feeling better, Mum. I'm still weak, but I'm better." Veronica looked at her son with glistening eyes, and for the first time since she arrived, her mask of control cracked. She stood up abruptly from the table. "I have to go. I have an appointment." And she left, almost running, leaving everyone in silence. Michael went after her, catching up to her in the entrance hall. "Veronica, wait. What's going on? Do you know something?" She stopped, but didn't turn around. "You think you can fix everything now, Michael? After everything you've done, you think you can just—" Her voice broke. "You destroyed lives, entire families, and now you act like you're the victim. What are you talking about?" Veronica finally turned, and there were tears on her face. "One day you'll find out, Michael. And when you do, you'll understand that none of this happened by chance, nothing." And then she was gone, leaving Michael standing in the hall, more confused and frightened than ever. Iris, who had watched everything from a distance, knew that time was running out. The pieces were moving, the secrets beginning to leak. And soon, very soon, the whole truth would come out, a truth that would change everything, a truth that would reveal that revenge, just like poison, can spread silently through generations, contaminating the innocent and the guilty without distinction. But before the time for revelations came, there was a boy to save. And Iris would not rest until Gabriel was completely healed. Because regardless of who his parents were, regardless of the crimes that had been committed in the past, that boy deserved to live. And she, who had survived so many terrible things, would make sure he did. The days that followed were ones of silent transformation. Gabriel began waking up earlier, his eyes regaining the sparkle Michael thought he had lost forever. The tremors in his hands lessened with each morning, and the boy started to be able to hold objects on his own. First a spoon, then a glass, then a pencil. Each small victory was celebrated quietly by Mrs. Lords, who watched everything with tears in her eyes and a growing weight in her heart. Iris maintained the strict treatment. 3 times a day, she prepared the herbal infusions, applied the poultices, and massaged Gabriel's limbs with precise movements that seemed to awaken dormant muscles. And as she worked, she observed, she watched every person who entered the room, every employee who moved through the house, every suspicious movement. She knew the poison had stopped being administered since the contaminated clay was discovered, but that didn't mean the danger had passed. Whoever was responsible was still nearby, probably waiting, planning their next move. It was on a Thursday afternoon, exactly 1 week after her arrival, that Iris noticed something strange. Gabriel had just finished his improvised physical therapy session, managing to take 3 steps on his own with Iris's support, when Benedict entered, the room carrying a box of new toys. He said they were gifts from family friends who had sent them after hearing of the boy's improvement. But something in the way Benedict held the box, in the way his eyes avoided meeting Iris's, set off an alarm in her head. "May I see those toys before you give them to Gabriel?" Iris asked, holding out her hands. Benedict hesitated for a fraction of a second, so brief it was almost unnoticeable. "Of course, girl. They're just some cars and games." Iris took the box and began to examine each item, carefully. On the surface, everything seemed normal. New toys still in their packaging, nothing suspicious. But she had learned that the most effective poison is the one that hides in plain sight. She opened each package, smelled each toy, ran her fingers over every surface. And it was when she reached the last item, another set of colorful modeling clay, that she found it. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. The same metallic odor she had recognized in the first contaminated box. "Gabriel, sweetie," she said to the boy in a calm voice, "why don't you go with Mrs. Lords and have some juice in the kitchen? I need to talk to Benedict about something." Gabriel, still weak but much more alert than a week ago, sensed the tension in the air. "Okay," he replied, and let Mrs. Lords, who immediately understood something was wrong, lead him away. When they were alone, Iris held up the box of clay in front of Benedict. "Do you want to explain to me why this is contaminated?" The color drained from Benedict's face. I don't know what you're talking about, girl. This clay came sealed. I didn't even open." "Do it you didn't have to," Iris replied, her voice low but heavy with accusation. "The poison was already inside before it was even packaged. Someone prepared it this way on purpose, and you brought it into this room knowing exactly what it was." Benedict took a step back, his hands trembling. "You don't understand. You don't know what it's like. I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," Iris said, her anger finally overflowing. "You chose to poison an innocent child, a child who never did you any harm." "My daughter is dying," Benedict exploded, and suddenly his entire composure shattered. The man's eyes filled with tears. "She has leukemia. The treatments cost a fortune. I had no way to pay, no way to save my little girl. And then she appeared. She offered me money, a lot of money, enough for all the treatments, to give my daughter a chance at life." "She who?" Iris pressed. "Mrs. Veronica." Benedict's voice was an agonized whisper. "She came to me 6 months ago, said that if I did what she asked, my Luna would be saved. She said I just had to put a special powder in Gabriel's toys, that it wouldn't really hurt him, just make him sick for a while. She promised no one would get seriously hurt." Iris felt a wave of rage so intense she had to force herself not to scream. "You believed that? You really thought poisoning a child wouldn't really hurt him?" Benedict sank into a chair, his face in his hands. "I didn't want to. I swear to God, I didn't want to. But every night I looked at my Luna wasting away in that hospital bed, and I thought that maybe one suffering could pay for another, that maybe God would forgive me if it was to save my daughter." The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Iris looked at this broken man, this desperate father who had made an impossible choice, and she felt something she didn't expect to feel. Compassion. Not for the act, which was unforgivable, but for the pain that had led him to it. She knew that pain well. The pain of watching someone you love fade away while you can do nothing. "Did Veronica give you anything else?" Iris finally asked, her voice softer now. "More clay? Anything else contaminated?" Benedict nodded, miserably. "There's another box in the boot of my car. She gave it to me yesterday, said it was important for Gabriel to start playing with the clay again soon, before he recovered completely." Iris took a deep breath, trying to process everything. "Where is your daughter receiving treatment?" "St. Thomas's Hospital on Oxford Street, Pediatric Oncology." "And Veronica is really paying for it?" "Yes. Every month the money arrives, always on the right date. I checked. The treatments are being paid for. My Luna is responding well. The doctors say she might be cured." "So your daughter gets to live," Iris said, and there was a hard edge to her voice, "while you were trying to make someone else's child die slowly." The words hit Benedict like punches. He began to sob, his whole body shaking. I know what I did. I'll have to live with this for the rest of my life. But what was I supposed to do, let my daughter die when there was a chance to save her?" "You should have found another way," Iris replied. "You should have asked for help. You should have told Mr. Taylor. You should have done anything but this. And now you need to tell him everything, immediately." But finding Michael wasn't difficult. He was standing in the doorway of the room, having arrived in the middle of the conversation. His face was a mask of shock, rage, and something that looked like deep betrayal. "How many times, Benedict?" His voice was too controlled, the kind of control that comes before an explosion. How many times did you put poison in my son's things? Benedict couldn't look his employer in the eye. Over 20 times in 6 months. It started small, just a little bit of powder in the original clay. Then, when you started calling doctors, when you became more watchful, it got harder. I had to be more creative. A little in the talcum powder Mrs. Lords used after his bath. A little in the hand cream on his bedside table. Always just a little. Always when no one would notice. Michael closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, there was something broken in them. 15 years, Benedict. You've worked here for 15 years. I trusted you. I considered you almost family, and you— His voice finally broke. You tried to kill my son. Mr. Taylor, I didn't know what to do. My Luna— Don't talk to me about your daughter, Michael exploded, all his anger finally spilling out. Gabriel is a child too. He has a right to live too. And you chose her life over his, as if you were God, as if you had that right. Iris placed a hand on Michael's arm, calming him. We need to think clearly now. Benedict isn't the real enemy here. He's a tool. The one behind this is Veronica. And we need to find out why. Why she wants— Gabriel— She stopped. The word caught in her throat but forced herself to continue. Why she wants Gabriel gone. Michael looked at Iris, and for the first time, he saw in this girl not just a healer, but an investigator, a warrior, someone who understood that sometimes you have to look into the abyss to understand where the darkness comes from. Did Veronica say anything to you? Michael asked Benedict. Did she give you a reason? She just said it was justice, Benedict replied in a trembling voice. That after everything that had been done, after all the lives destroyed, it was time to settle the score. I didn't understand at the time. I didn't care to understand. I just wanted the money to save my daughter. Michael sat down heavily, as if the weight of it all had finally become too much. Settle the score, he murmured. What score? What did I do to deserve this? Iris exchanged a look with Mrs. Lords, who had returned and was leaning against the door, silent tears streaming down her face. The housekeeper knew. She had probably always known, or at least suspected. But fear, the need for her job, the desire not to get involved, all of it had kept her silent. Mrs. Lords, Iris said softly, I think it's time you told us what you know. The housekeeper closed her eyes, and when she opened them, there was a determination that wasn't there before. Mr. Taylor needs to know the truth, all of it, about Veronica, about Gabriel, about the past. A long pause. About St. Rita's Vale. The name of the village fell like a bombshell. Michael lifted his head sharply, and Iris felt her heart race. St. Rita's Vale, the place where it all began, the place that connected, all of them in ways that had not yet been fully revealed. Mrs. Lords, what do you know about that place? Michael pressed. I know that's where it all started, the housekeeper replied, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. That's where you built your empire on the ruins of entire families. It's where people were driven from their lands, where homes were torn down, where an entire community was destroyed. The pause was heavy. And it's where Veronica lost everything. What? Michael was visibly confused. Veronica never lived in St. Rita's Vale. She's from London, always has been. No, sir, Mrs. Lords contradicted. She's not from London, she's from St. Rita's Vale. Born there, grew up there, and would have stayed there if you hadn't destroyed everything. She changed her name, rebuilt her life, and when she met you years later here in London, you had no idea who she really was. The silence that followed was absolute. Iris felt her heart beating so hard it seemed everyone could hear it. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed was darker than she had imagined. Veronica met you on purpose, Mrs. Lords continued. She planned everything. The chance meeting at the party, the romance, everything. She wanted to be close to the man who had destroyed her life in order to— The housekeeper stopped, as if the next words were too heavy to speak. To get revenge. But she had my son, Michael protested, his voice sounding desperate. Gabriel is my son. How does that fit into revenge? Iris and Mrs. Lords exchanged glances again, and it was the girl who finally spoke, her voice soft but relentless. And what if Gabriel isn't your biological son, Mr. Taylor? What if he's someone else's son? Someone Veronica loved. Someone who was lost because of what happened in St. Rita's Vale? The truth, when it was finally revealed, was like an earthquake. Michael was paralyzed, processing, and Iris saw the exact moment it all clicked in his mind. Gabriel was not his son. He never had been. He was the son of a man Veronica had loved, a man from St. Rita's Vale, a man whose life had been destroyed by Michael's actions. And Veronica, consumed by hatred and a desire for revenge, had raised Gabriel in her enemy's house, letting him love the boy as his own, only to later take everything from him in the cruelest way possible. "Where is Veronica now?" Iris asked, her voice cutting through the shock. Michael took a moment to answer, his mind still reeling. "She has a flat in Notting Hill, but I don't know if she'll be there." "We have to go there," Iris said firmly. "We have to confront her. We have to end this before she tries something worse." "But Gabriel," Michael began. "Gabriel is safe now," Iris interrupted. "The poison is out of his system. He's recovering. But Veronica is still out there, and as long as she is, the danger hasn't passed. She could try again in another way." Michael nodded slowly, still in a state of shock, but starting to react. "I'll go with you." "And me too," Mrs. Lord said, surprising everyone. "I've been silent for too long. I let things happen because I was afraid, but not anymore. I won't let that woman destroy anything else." Benedict, who had been forgotten in a corner of the room, spoke in a weak voice. "And me? What's going to happen to me?" Michael looked at the man, who had betrayed his trust, at the desperate father who had made terrible choices for the love of his own daughter. "I'm not going to call the police," he said finally. "Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I understand desperation. But you will leave this house today, and you will never see Gabriel or any of us again. As for your daughter's treatment," Michael paused, struggling with himself, "I will continue to pay for it, because she is innocent in all of this. But you, Benedict, you will have to live with what you've done." Benedict stumbled out of the room, a broken man carrying the weight of his choices. As Michael, Iris, and Mrs. Lords prepared to go to Veronica's flat, Gabriel was brought back to the room. The boy was visibly better, with more color in his face, more strength in his movements. He looked at the three adults and realized something big was about to happen. "Are you going to get my mum?" Gabriel asked, his voice small but clear. Iris knelt in front of him, holding his small hands. "Yes, we are. And when we come back, some things are going to be different. You might find out things about your family that will be hard to understand. But I want you to know one thing." She looked into the boy's eyes with intensity. "You are loved. Regardless of who your biological father is, regardless of what happened in the past, you are loved. And that's what matters." Gabriel nodded, with a surprising maturity for his 9 years. "I know. And I love you guys too, all of you." Michael felt tears burn his eyes. He hugged the boy tightly, the boy he had loved as a son for 9 years, the boy he had discovered was not his blood, but would never stop being his family. "We're going to sort this out, champ," Michael promised. "We'll sort it out, and then we'll all move forward, as a family." And with that promise echoing between them, the three left the mansion, heading for Veronica's flat for the final revelations, for the reckoning that had been years too long in the making. The sunset painted the London sky orange and red, as if the city itself knew that something significant was about to occur. The truth kept for so long would finally come to light, and, with it perhaps some form of redemption for everyone involved, or perhaps just more pain. But either way, there was no more running. The past had caught up with the present, and it was time to face it head-on. Veronica's flat was in an elegant building in Notting Hill, with a 24-hour doorman and a view of Holland Park. It was the kind of place that screamed status without being overly ostentatious, perfect for someone who wanted to appear successful but discreet. The doorman, recognizing Michael, let them up without question, and the three rode in silence in the mirrored lift to the 12th floor. Iris watched Michael in the reflection, The man who days ago had seemed unshakable, master of his own destiny, was now visibly shaken. His hands trembled slightly as he pressed the lift button, and there were lines on his face that hadn't been there a week before. Mrs. Lords, for her part, prayed softly, her lips moving in silent pleas for courage and discernment. When they rang the doorbell, there was a long silence, then approaching footsteps. The door opened and Veronica appeared, wearing a silk robe and with her face clean of makeup, looking at once younger and more tired. Her eyes widened when she saw the three of them standing there, and for a moment something like panic flashed across her face. "What? What are you doing here?" she managed to say. "We know, Veronica," Michael said, his voice steadier than he expected. "We know everything about the poison, about Benedict, about St. Rita's veil." He paused, took a deep breath. "About Gabriel." The boy's name seemed to hit Veronica like a slap. She took a step back, holding onto the doorknob for support. "You don't know anything," she tried to say, but her voice came out weak, unconvincing. "Then explain it to us," Iris intervened, stepping forward. "Explain why you tried to destroy an innocent child. Explain why you used a desperate father as a weapon. Explain why you fed your hatred instead of seeking justice." Veronica looked at this small, thin girl, who spoke with the authority of someone much older, and something inside her broke. "Come in," she said finally, opening the door completely. "If you want answers, you'd better sit down, because this is going to take a while." The flat was beautiful but impersonal, like a luxury. Hotel suite. Few personal objects, no photos on the walls, nothing to indicate who really lived there. Veronica led them to the living room, where enormous windows showed the city lighting up as night fell. She poured water for everyone, not because she was a good hostess, but because she needed something to do with her hands. Finally, she sat in an armchair opposite them and began to speak, her voice laden with an ancient pain that was finally finding a voice. "My real name is Vera Santos," she began. "I was born in St. Rita's Vale, a small village, in the Cotswolds. My father was a farmer, my mother a midwife. We lived in a simple house, but we were happy. The whole community was close-knit. Everyone knew each other, helped each other. It was the kind of place that doesn't exist anymore, the kind of place that people like you—" She looked at Michael with hard eyes. "That people like you destroy without a second thought." "I was young when I met Robert. He was the son of one of the community leaders, a man who understood laws, who could read contracts, who protected the people. When businessmen came trying to buy our land, Robert was my world. We were going to get married, have children, grow old in that village. We had plans, dreams." Veronica's voice trembled. "And then you showed up." Michael listened in silence, and every word was like a knife being twisted deeper. "Your company wanted to build a luxury resort right where our community stood. You offered money, a lot of money, but the land was worth more than that. It was our history, our identity. So we refused to sell, and that's when things started to get worse." Veronica closed her eyes, reliving it all. Mysterious fires destroyed crops, water sources were contaminated, people started getting sick in strange ways, and anyone who tried to complain, anyone who tried to fight, they just disappeared. Iris felt her heart clench, because she knew that story well. It was the same story the woman who raised her had lived. "Robert's father was one of the first to go," Veronica continued. "They found him in the river, said it was an accident, but we all knew. Then it was my mother. She was helping the women who were getting sick, using herbs, blessings, and suddenly she got sick too. She died in 3 weeks, wasting away with the doctors unable to explain what it was." Veronica opened her eyes, which shone with unshed tears. "It was only years later that I found out. Poisoning. The same thing I tried to do to Gabriel. The irony is not lost on me." "And Robert?" Mrs. Lords asked softly. "Robert became obsessed with proving what was happening. He gathered evidence, testimonies, started a lawsuit against your company." Veronica looked directly at Michael. "Do you remember him? Robert Ferrer?" Tall brown eyes with that determined way of someone who doesn't give up. Michael closed his eyes, and when he opened them, there was recognition in them. "I remember. He was the only one who really fought until the end. Until the end is a kind way of putting it, Veronica spat. He was beaten, Michael. Beaten so violently that he was never the same again. He was left with permanent injuries, brain damage, difficulty walking, speaking. The man I loved was destroyed. And do you know what happened next? He pushed me away. Said I deserved someone better, someone whole. He left the village and I never saw him again. The silence that followed was heavy. Iris leaned forward. And Gabriel, where does he fit into this? Veronica wiped away the tears that were finally streaming down her face. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks after Robert left. Pregnant with the child of a man I would never see again, in a village that was being systematically destroyed. So I ran. I came to London, changed my name, rebuilt my life from scratch. I worked hard, I studied, I transformed myself into Veronica, a sophisticated urban woman that no one would associate with Vera from St. Rita's Vale. And when you met Mr. Taylor, Mrs. Lord said, it was already a planned encounter. Yes, Veronica admitted without hesitation. I watched him for months. I studied his routine, his tastes, where he went. And then I put myself in his path, at a business party, pretending to be someone he would want to know. It was easy. Men like him are predictable. And when he fell in love, when he suggested we live together, when he accepted Gabriel as his son. Veronica paused. I thought I had achieved the perfect revenge, to make him love the son of the man he had destroyed, to make him invest everything, emotionally and financially, in a child who carried the blood of his enemy. But that wasn't enough, Iris said, her voice hard. You needed more. You needed him to feel the same pain you felt. Veronica looked at the girl, truly seeing her for the first time. And who are you to judge me? You don't know what it's like to lose everything. You don't know what it's like to live with hatred burning inside you for years. I know exactly what it's like, Iris replied, standing up. Because I'm from St. Rita's Vale too. Because the woman who raised me, who taught me everything about plants and cures, was the village healer, Mother Rose. Do you remember her? Veronica's face turned pale. Rose, little Rose from the wattle and daub house near the river. My God, she died too. She was one of the first. She died from poisoning, Iris said, and there was so much pain in her voice that even Veronica seemed to shrink. The same way you tried to kill Gabriel, the same way your mother was killed, and you know what else? She could have escaped. They offered her money too to leave, but she refused because that land was sacred, because generations of healers had lived there, so they killed her. And I, a 10-year-old child, had to watch her waste away, unable to do anything. Iris took a step towards Veronica. So don't talk to me about hatred. Don't talk to me about revenge, because I had to make a choice. I had to choose between letting hatred consume me or using what she taught me to help other people. And look at this. The irony of life brought me to the house of the man who destroyed everything, gave me the chance to avenge Mother Rose. I could have let Gabriel die. I could have said it was justice. But do you know what I did? Iris had tears in her eyes now. I saved him, because he is an innocent child, because revenge doesn't bring anyone back, because the cycle has to stop somewhere. Iris's words fell like bombs in the silence of the flat. Veronica began to sob, her whole body shaking. I just wanted him to feel it. I just wanted him to understand. And I do. I understand, Michael said, finally speaking, his voice hoarse with emotion. I understand that I destroyed lives, that I put profit above people, that I was responsible for immeasurable suffering. And I am sorry. I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't bring anyone back, but... He paused, wiping his eyes. But I have to try to fix it. I have to do things differently. Veronica looked at him with an expression that mixed anger, sadness, and something like resignation. And Gabriel? What will happen to Gabriel? Gabriel is my son, Michael said firmly. Not biologically, but in every other way that matters. I have loved him since the day he was born. I cared for him, protected him, was there for every laugh and every tear, and I will continue to be his father, if he wants me, if you allow it, because he deserves to have a family, even if that family is messy and complicated. "And you?" Veronica asked, looking at Iris. "What do you want?" Iris thought for a long moment. "I want St. Rita's Vale not to have been destroyed in vain. I want Mother Rose's knowledge to live on. I want children like Gabriel to have access to healing, both from modern medicine and from ancient wisdom. And I want—" she hesitated. "I want a place in the world, a place where I can use what I've learned to help other people." Michael looked at the girl, at this small warrior who had saved his son and, in a way, saved him too. "Then let's build it. I'll transform the mansion. Part of it will become a clinic where modern medicine and traditional knowledge work together. We'll bring in other healers, other knowledge that is being lost. We'll educate, we'll heal, we'll do the opposite of what I did in the past." "And your business?" Mrs. Lords asked. "Your partners won't accept this." "Then they won't be my partners anymore," Michael replied, with a determination that surprised even himself. "I'll sell my shares. I'll use that money to rebuild what I destroyed, starting with St. Rita's Vale. We'll rebuild the community, bring back those who were driven out, build houses, schools, a health center. We'll do it right this time." Veronica listened to it all in silence, processing. "And me? What happens to me? Are you going to turn me over to the police?" Michael exchanged glances with Iris and Mrs. Lords. "That depends. You can continue to be a part of Gabriel's life. You can help with this reconstruction project. You can choose to use your pain to create something good, or you can choose the path of destruction. But know that regardless of your choice, Gabriel will be okay. He has a family now, a strange, patched-together family, but a family." Veronica was silent for long minutes. Finally, she spoke, her voice small. "Robert. I need to find Robert. I need Gabriel to meet his biological father. He deserves to know where he comes from." "We'll help," Michael promised. "We'll find Robert. We'll bring him to London. We'll give him the treatment he needs. And we'll let Gabriel know his full story, without lies, without secrets." The days that followed were ones of profound change. Michael truly began to dismantle his empire. He sold shares, cancelled contracts, faced the fury of partners and investors. But for the first time in his life, he slept peacefully. His nightmares had stopped. Gabriel continued to improve. With the poison completely out of his system and Iris's treatment, he regained almost all of his mobility. He started running again, playing, smiling that wide, genuine smile of a happy child. And when they told him the truth, about Veronica, about Robert, about his origins, he listened with surprising maturity. "So Michael isn't my real dad?" Gabriel asked, but there was no hurt in his voice, only curiosity. "I am," Michael replied, hugging the boy. "Maybe not genetically, but in all the ways that really matter. And if you want to meet Robert, we'll make that happen. You can have two dads, the biological one and the one who chose to love you." "And a complicated mum," Gabriel added with a small smile. "And a big sister who saves lives." He looked at Iris. "You're my sister now, right? Chosen, not by blood, but chosen." Iris, who had never had a family after losing Mother Rose, felt warm tears run down her face. "I am, champ. I am." The clinic opened 3 months later, in a simple but emotional event. Half of the mansion had been transformed into treatment spaces, with medical offices equipped with state-of-the-art technology, but also with rooms for herbalists, midwives, and healers. At the entrance, a plaque read, "The Mother Rose Healing Center, where tradition and science walk together." Mrs. Cedar, the herb seller from the market, was one of the first to be invited to work there. Other healers were located and brought in, each with their specific knowledge. Young doctors interested in integrative medicine joined the project, and Iris, still so young, became the bridge between the two worlds, translating knowledge, teaching, learning. In St. Rita's Vale, the rebuilding began. Robert was found living in a small country town, still struggling with the effects of the violence he had suffered, but alive. When Veronica found him again, they both cried for hours. And when Robert met Gabriel, when he saw the boy who had his eyes and his smile, Something inside him that had been broken began to heal. Veronica, for her part, chose the path of reconstruction. She moved to St. Rita's Vale and led the project to bring back the residents who had been driven out. She used her business experience now for good, organizing cooperatives, securing resources, fighting for the rights of her people. And slowly, very slowly, her hatred was replaced by purpose. Benedict never worked for Michael again, but his daughter Luna made a full recovery. And when she grew up, she sought out Gabriel to ask for forgiveness for what her father had done. Gabriel, who had inherited Iris's capacity for forgiveness, hugged her and said that she was not to blame for her father's choices. Mrs. Lourdes remained at the house, but now as part of the clinic's team, caring for patients with the same dedication she had shown Gabriel. And at night, when the house was quiet, she would smile to herself, knowing she had finally done the right thing. 2 years after Iris's first visit, the mansion in Kensington was a completely different place. Where there had once been empty luxury, there was now life. Street children were taken in and educated. Sick people found healing. Ancient knowledge was preserved and shared. And at the center of it all was Gabriel, now 11 years old, healthy and happy, dividing his time between studying medicine with the doctors and learning about herbs with Iris. On a Sunday afternoon, they all gathered in the garden for lunch. Michael, Veronica, Robert, Gabriel, Iris, Mrs. Lourdes, Mrs. Sider, and several other people who had become family over those years. It was not a traditional family, but it was real, built on choices, forgiveness, and love. Gabriel looked around the table at all the people he loved and smiled. "You know what I've realized?" he said, and everyone stopped to listen. "I realized that my story could have ended in that bed, with my body slowly paralyzing, but it didn't, because a brave girl decided to help, because a father decided to change, because a mother chose construction over destruction, because even Benedict's mistake ended up leading to something good." He raised his glass of juice. "So a toast to the family we choose, to stories that don't end in tragedy, and to second chances." Everyone raised their glasses with tears in their eyes and smiles on their faces. Iris thought of Mother Rose and imagined that wherever she was smiling too, because the knowledge she had preserved had not died. It was there, alive, vibrant, saving lives and building bridges. Her death had not been in vain. Michael looked at Gabriel, at the boy who had taught him that power comes not from money or contracts, but from love and right choices. And for the first time in decades, he felt truly rich. Veronica looked at Robert, holding his hand under the table, and realized that revenge would never have brought her the peace she had finally found in forgiveness and reconstruction. And Gabriel, the boy who had almost died, who had been used as a weapon in a war that began before he was born, was alive, happy, surrounded by love, healing, and being healed at the same time. The story that had begun with poison, hatred, and pain ended with healing, hope, and family. Because sometimes the darkest stories are the ones that produce the brightest lights, and sometimes salvation comes from the most unlikely hands, from a barefoot girl who knew that healing isn't just about herbs and treatments, but about breaking cycles, choosing love over hate, and building bridges where there were once only chasms. St. Rita's Vale had been destroyed, but it was being rebuilt, not as it was, but as something new, something better. The mansion in Kensington, once a symbol of empty luxury, was now a beacon of hope. And Gabriel, whose name means messenger, had become exactly that. A messenger that it's possible to start over, that it's never too late to do things differently, that family isn't about blood, but about who chooses to stay when things get tough. And as the sun set over London, painting the sky orange and pink, that strange and patched together but profoundly real family remained united, living proof that even from the greatest tragedies, something beautiful can be born. Because in the end it all comes down to choices, and they had chosen love. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Michael, Gabriel, Iris, and Veronica has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of redemption, forgiveness, and reconstruction, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Every day we bring intense stories like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul, which show that it's never too late to start over, and that true love is the one we choose to cultivate. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode, with another story that will make you reflect on family, choices, and the transformative power of forgiveness.